forced from home up in the Hunter. Dagger Denver had no choice but to leave right from her property, a little more than the clothes, right in her back, up in Maitland. Under the radar, underfunded and undervalued. More than 100 community leaders want the most made of one-off chance. Meanwhile, residents raise alarm against the development up in Mount Hutton. And heartache for Mayweather and the Hunter Rugby Union as their hooker, Ryan Goodman, faces surgery because of an ankle injury. Good evening, welcome to SBS Newcastle News. I'm Conklin McLeod. Also coming up, the Hunter Wildfires hooker Phil Bradford overcomes the pain of a lingering rib injury to inspire his team to a crucial 31-12 victory into a shoot shield at the number 2 sports ground. And heartache for Nick Kyrgios as he goes down to Novak Djokovic in the Wimbledon final. But first though, Deirdre Denver is barely shielded from the wind as biting temperatures blow through the makeshift shelter she's living in alongside her 13 dogs at Maitland Showground. The floodwaters rose dangerously high. The Louth Park resident was forced to leave her property in the early hours of Wednesday with little more than the clothes on her back and her closest companions. The first 2 nights, Miss Denver slept in her car with the dogs, running the heater on and off to keep herself warm. But for Miss Denver and a number of other displaced Louth Park residents, it's all they've got, unable to return home with nowhere else to go. Also, it could be days before she could return home to assess the damage. But despite it all, she remains in good spirits. As rain continued to batter the Hunter over the weekend, New South Wales SES crews were kept busy with rescues and resupply missions to cut off communities across the region, while Singleton started to see some reprieve from rising floodwater. Levels remained steady at Maitland, Raymond Terrace, Duckenfield, Hinton and Miller's Forest. And while most have gotten the message about steering clear of floodwater, New South Wales SES Medford Incident Control Centre Public Information Officer Steve Lawrence said crews are still being called to rescues, including a couple trapped in a car at Raymond Terrace on Saturday night. A proposed development at Mount Hutton has raised alarm bells for residents as real estate agents boast about half the blocks already being sold before it is approved for approval from the council. The Adams Ridge subdivision wedged between Warners Bay Road and the narrow Auckland Road could see all trees totally cleared from the 2.4 hectare block to 39 new homes. Meanwhile, when Maddie Whelan felt a bruise-like pain in her breast that was not subside, her first big hurdle was finding a doctor who would take her concerns seriously due to her age. Then came the chemotherapy, surgery and radiation. The Charlestown woman was 26 at the time, with a family history of breast cancer. Now 27, she fears, had she not kept advocating for herself, to get an ultrasound, then a biopsy, that her stage 3 cancer would not have been found until it was too late. Coming up, at least 14 dead in a bar shooting in South Africa, and ex-Mexican leader Luis Echeverria dies at the age of 100. Welcome back. At least 14 people are dead following a mass shooting up in Johannesburg in South Africa. And it's also left 3 others in a critical condition. Police are investigating reports that a group of men arrived in a minibus taxi and opened fire on some of the patrons at the bar late on Saturday night. Police were on Sunday morning removing bodies of the deceased and investigating what had led to the mass shooting. The 3 critically injured and 1 other person wounded were taken to Chris Haney Barrow Hospital. Meanwhile, former Mexican president Luis Echeverria, who took office in 1970, promising a democratic opening for the country, but oversaw 6 of the harshest years of a so-called dirty war against dissidents, has died at the age of 100. Meanwhile, Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador on Twitter confirmed the death on Saturday, expressing his condolences to Echeverria's family. Meanwhile, television personality Oprah Winfrey's father, Vernon, has died at the age of 89. Oprah confirmed in an Instagram post that her father passed away at Nashville in Tennessee on Friday. Meanwhile, in the UK, a British cabinet minister tipped to be a frontrunner in the Conservative Party's leadership race has ruled himself out of the contest. Defence Minister Ben Wallace said after careful consideration and the and discussion with colleagues and family, he will not be running to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative leader and the country's next Prime Minister. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's President and Prime Minister agreed to resign on Saturday after the country's most chaotic day in months of political turmoil, with protesters storming both officials' homes and setting fire to one of the buildings in a rage over the nation's severe economic crisis. Meanwhile, its Prime Minister said he will leave office once a new government is in place. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed 5 diplomats, including his ambassador to Germany, according to a decree published by the presidential decree. To sport now, and of course in rugby league, Knights legend Andrew Johns has fired a stinging broadside at the players he helps coach after the side's controversial loss to South Sydney on Friday. Speaking on the Sunday NRL footy show, Johns, who last week extended his deal as a Knights coaching consultant into next season, said there was no excuse for the defeat at McDonald Jones Stadium, which he rated as close to Newcastle's worst performance this season. Still on the Knights, and of course, one of their players, David Clemmer, has all but apologised to his teammates after he was sent off in the last minute of their 40-28 loss on Friday night. But perhaps it should have been the other way around. But if anyone should be saying sorry, it's not Clemmer, but the vast majority of the players around him. Nobody is condoning the forearm to the head of opponent Daniel Saluka Fafita that earned Clemmer his marching orders from referee Todd Smith. That is all but caused controversy. Still on, and of course, Daniel Saifidi believes twin brother Jacob will handle his State of Origin debut better than he did, declaring New South Wales have picked the right guy to get the job done in this state in the series decider on Wednesday. Jacob, who trained with New South Wales on the North Coast as a reserve for much of last week, was preparing on Thursday to play for the Knights the next night when he got the call to replace injured starting prop Jordan McLean. Now to local rugby union, and of course Hunter Wildfire's hooker Phil Bradford overcame the pain of a rib injury to help his team secure a crucial 31-12 victory over Parramatta up in the Shute Shield on Saturday at the number 2 sports ground. Meanwhile, the women secured a draw against their rivals. To the Hunter Rugby Union, and Mayweather hooker Ryan Goodman faces surgery following an ankle injury which saw the Greens' 45-0 win cut short against Singleton at Rugby Park on Saturday. Goodman required an ambulance, and after a lengthy delay, both captains agreed to call the Hunter Rugby Union fixture off early. There was a roughly half an hour remaining. Meanwhile, the Greens led 38-0 at half-time. And of course, other round 11 games, Southern Beaches and Nelson Bay, also University and Hamilton, were already washed out because of the wet weather. To soccer, and Cristiano Ronaldo has skipped Manchester United's pre-season tour to Thailand and Australia, with more question marks hanging over his future at the Premier League Giants. United said on Friday that the 37-year-old forward had been granted additional time off to deal with an unspecified family issue that prevented him from reporting back for practice this week. The local soccer in Charlestown have claimed their maiden state cup title after accounting for defending champions Maitland 2-0 in Sunday's final at Spears Point. Brianna Williams and mid-season signing Indiana Asimus scored goals during the second half, helping Zooey hold on a lift to the Northern New South Wales women's football silverware. Meanwhile, previous State Cup winners are Warners Bay, Adamstown, Wallsend, and Maitland. Meanwhile, in Sunday's semis, Azuri knocked out Adamstown 2-0, and Maitland progressed with a 3-0 victory over the Mid-Coast. The basketball and the Newcastle Falcons, men and women, have secured a victory over the Hills Hornets over the weekend. It was fantastic for Newcastle, who were too strong for their rivals. Meanwhile, the Maitland Mustangs had no choice but to withdraw their match because of the floods in the Hunter. To ice hockey, and the Newcastle North Stars have retained top spot on the Australian Ice Hockey League ladder after ahead of clashes against the second and third place sides after claiming a 6-3 victory over the Sydney Ice Dogs. The North Stars went into Saturday's match at Macquarie Ice Rink at risk of losing first place to either the Sydney Bears or Canberra Brave, who were second and third respectively, before facing each other Sunday. The North Stars scored first and the only goal before coming back in the second, third and fourth and final quarter. Of course, the North Stars faced the Sydney Bears at the Hunter Ice Skating Stadium at Warners Bay on Saturday. To real hockey, and of course, Edward Hunt has scored a goal after a full-time siren to see North split the points with Gosford and remain undefeated this season. The latter leading Blues and second place Magpies had a dramatic 2-2 draw at Central Coast Hockey Park on Sunday. Elsewhere on Sunday, Kobe Johnson produced a hat-trick as South beat West 6-1 in Newcastle, while the Rams hammered University 10-0 at Maitland. Meanwhile, the Newcastle Women's Premier League had a weekend off. To local AFL, and Killarney Vale are reaching for their record books after claiming their 10th consecutive win this season against Cardiff on Saturday. The undefeated Bombers overpowered the Hawks despite losing the first quarter, hitting their stride in the second and kicking 7 goals to lead to take a commanding lead. Meanwhile, Newcastle City and Turgot Avoca's game was washed out, as was the Singleton and Warners Bay match. To Wimbledon tennis, and of course, Matt Ebden and Max Purcell are selling themselves as the M&Ms after stealing the chocolates and joining some of the legends of Australian tennis as Wimbledon men's doubles champions. It comes after their historic victory on an early Sunday morning. Meanwhile, there was heartbreak for Nick Kyrgios. He lost to Novak Djokovic in last night's Wimbledon final. To the weather now, and it was alright for Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and the rest of the Hunter. It was okay for Newcastle, Charlestown, Cardiff, Newhampton, Mayfield and Fern Bay, as well as Wallsend, Cameron Park, Minmi, Shortland, as well as Belmont, Eleebana, Fassifern, Awaba, Taralba, and Toronto. And also, it was fined for Hexham, Tomago, Madawi, Saltash, Williamtown, Heatherbrae, Raymond Terrace, Beresfield, Gilliston Heights, as well as Curry Curry, and many more. Now to the main capital cities of our country. It'll be okay for Sydney and also for Brisbane. So too will Canberra, Melbourne, and Hobart, and also Cairns will be okay, and so too will Adelaide and Darwin. Going down to the troughs of New Zealand now, it'll be alright for Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch as well. In Southeast Asia, it'll be alright for Ho Chi Minh City as well as for Nha Trang, and also for the rest of it, and also for Vietnam. To Asia now, and it will be alright for Japan as well as for South Korea and North Korea. It will also be okay for Beijing and Shanghai. To the Middle East, and it will be alright for Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. It will be alright for North Sultan, and also for Kostanay as well, and also for Abakan. To Europe, it'll be fine for Ireland, it'll be fine for the United Kingdom, it'll be fine for Norway, Denmark, Germany, and France. It'll be okay for Spain and Italy. It'll be alright for Finland, as well as for Belarus and Ukraine. In Africa, it'll be fine for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and also for Kenya. Also, Ethiopia will also be okay, so toward Madagascar. And also Angola will be okay, so toward Nigeria. And also Chad will be okay, and so toward Algeria. In South America, it'll be fine for Brazil, fine for Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador, and also Peru will be okay. So too will Bolivia, and Argentina, and Uruguay. And for North America, it'll be alright for the United States. It'll be fine for Los Angeles, Denver, as well as Washington. It'll be okay for Dallas, and also for Nashville and Atlanta. And also it'll be fine for Seattle, and also it'll be fine for Canada as well. Recapping our top stories now. Mainland local Desiree Denver having no choice but to leave her property due to the floods. And also she was forced to do that just to make sure that she was safe on Sunday. Meanwhile, residents have raised the alarm against a development that has occurred right up in Mount Hutton. A Hunter Rugby Union player taken to hospital because of injury, and a shattered Nick Kyrgios still devastated after his heartbreaking loss to Novak Djokovic in the Wimbledon final. And that's it for now. My name's Conklin McLeod, and don't forget, I'll be back tomorrow. See you then.